friends, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Jamie, and today, after a bit of a break from YouTube, just a very brief short break, I am back with my first book review of 2024, and that is for my very highly anticipated read of Nestlings by Nat Cassidy. Yes, after pumping out all of that end of year content back in December, I was just a little bit feeling the need for a break, so I took a nice long break, and also I had some books to read before I could get anything out, so that's why I've been away for the past week or so, but back now with this review, and it is one that I have been really thinking about and figuring out exactly what I want to say and how I want to convey what I'm feeling, because honestly I have a lot of thoughts. So let's get right into it. Nestlings by Nat Cassidy. This is the second horror book from Nat Cassidy, known for Mary, An Awakening of Horror, a book that I have not read yet, but Nestlings follows a young married couple with a tiny 1-year-old baby daughter as they are granted the opportunity of a lifetime to live in one of New York City's most posh and coveted apartments due to an affordable housing lottery. They jump at the opportunity to live in this stunning and historic apartment setting, but soon realize that the building is maybe a little off and it's having some very odd and drastic effects on their baby daughter. This book has been compared to Rosemary's Baby and Salem's Lot, and Nat Cassidy even references both of those books explicitly in this novel. That's all I'm going to say for the plot, because I really feel that anything beyond that would be a spoiler, so we are just going to get into my thoughts and if I feel this is worth your time. So what did I think of this? Well, unfortunately, I did not love this as much as I wanted to. This was a very, very hyped release for me. I was inexplicably expecting this to be 5 stars, and the reason I say inexplicably is because I have not yet read Mary, An Awakening of Horror, even though I really do want to, but I've had no previous experience with Nat Cassidy. I was thinking this would be a 5 stars based off of purely the synopsis, which is something I'm always interested in. I like dynamics between young married couples. I like examining those relationships once a child is involved. I like a lot of the setup in here, and I was just very, very excited. I love the cover. I mean, I guess I have to say that was a big reason why I was drawn to this, but overall, I had just heard so many amazing things about Nat Cassidy and about what he does with horror. It sounded like it was quite literary leaning to me. It sounded like it dealt with a lot of social commentary and themes, which I really need in my horror to actually enjoy it as much as, to get it to that 5-star level. So I was just feeling that this would tick all of my boxes. And maybe because of that hype, that is where like a little bit of the disappointment seeps in. But the reality is I had a couple big issues with this book. However, that is not to say that this was a bad book. I think it's actually, perfectly solid. I would probably give it around a 3.5, but I hope as I give you my reasoning for my rating, you will be able to judge whether or not this will be for you. Starting off with some pros of the book though, I mean, as this was my first Nat Cassidy, I will say that I was very impressed with his character work. The book switches perspectives between the husband and the wife character, and there was actually many points in time where when we were reading from the woman's perspective that I actually had to stop and be like, is Nat Cassidy, is Nat short for Natalie? Is this author a man or a woman? And there's no author photo, so I actually didn't know. But I quickly realized that it was a man writing. But the fact that I had that moment of pause, that it really made me, stop and think and be like, wow, this is some good writing of this character, I was just very impressed by. And it's not just because I don't think men can write women or anything like that. That has nothing to do with it. It's just that the fact that this story in particular does deal with trauma surrounding childbirth and pregnancy, and just the way that he is able to express those just deeply personal issues, being someone who has never experienced them, is just very, very impressive. So I was just really, really blown away by his character work, especially with our female protagonist. I also think that he does incorporate his themes very well, and I think it's very easy to see where he's pulling inspiration from and how he's working those themes into this metaphor via horror. I will say that I think he is a big fan of telling versus showing when it comes to those themes though. So that is maybe one reason why I was kind of hesitant to give this a higher score, because I wanted a little bit more subtlety in my themes, but I always do. Connected to that point though, is that with this being my first Nat Cassidy book and I'd never read anything else by him, I did not know what his writing style would be like, and I was quite taken aback by the fact that his writing style is actually very casual and very contemporary. And I would have to say the opposite of my preference for writing styles. So this is not an objectively bad thing. Like, I don't think the writing is bad, and I don't think that he did a poor job of conveying things or anything like that. Like, I don't think the writing is bad. It's really just not to my personal taste. Like, I like just more elegant, elevated, kind of flowery, maybe even a little bit overwritten language at times. And this was just so much the opposite of that. It was very, very, very contemporary language. It was just super casual, using phrases and terminology and turns of phrase that are very modern, and just it's just something that I don't really like in my, writing style. So that was a little bit of a hurdle for me to get over, and honestly it did contribute to me, not having as great of a time with this as I wanted to. But I do think that it's a very accessible writing style, and I think that is the reason why it feels more genre fiction than it does literary fiction, because I was going in expecting maybe more of a literary story, and then the writing actually feels very genre fiction, which again, it's not a bad thing, it just comes down to personal preference. And then the second thing was the pacing of this story. I feel like this was really slow, and not really in the ways that I like a slow story, because I don't necessarily need it to be the most fast moving thing in the world, but I do feel like we need to be making some progress in one way or another. And I felt like a good half of the book is set up. And to be honest, I don't know that the payoff is worth that much setup. Sometimes the payoff is absolutely worth every single second that you put in trying to figure out where we're going. And I just don't think that this quite reached that. I mean, again, it was still good, but for that much setup, I really wanted a stronger payoff. And he does connect some dots, which is nice. But in the end, I just don't think it was really enough to warrant how much of this book was set up. And that then leads into the last thing that I think about this, which is that it just wasn't really scary enough. I mean, I know horror is very, very subjective, and what's scary to one person is not going to be scary to another, and vice versa. But for as much setup as was in here, I just didn't feel the tension that I needed to feel. I didn't feel scared often enough in order to feel like we were getting to this big climactic moment. It more just felt like we were kind of slowly creeping towards the inevitable, and it was really just not as tense as I wanted it to be. And I also think that the themes, if we are thinking about them in relation to the horror aspect, I just don't know that really made a lot of sense. I was just thinking, like, I either want to be really scared, or I want to really understand the kind of thematic elements of this horror, and I don't feel like it really landed in either direction for me, which meant that overall this ended up being just a middle of the road read for me, which again, so sad, because I did have such high hopes for it. But I wouldn't call this bad. I think I would just say that I had hyped this up too much, knowing literally nothing about this author. But all that being said, I do still really want to read Mary by this author because of the way that people talk about that book, and I think that one is probably closer to what I want as far as, thematic horror. This one I do feel like was a little bit meandering, a little bit messy, a little bit just trying to do too much, and it felt a little unfocused at times. There was good things about it. I liked the character work. I liked the social commentary. I like all the discussions that Cassidy's having from all these different angles. I appreciate all of that. I just don't think that it was as fine-tuned as I was expecting it to be, especially for how much hype it was given. So I would say if this premise sounds interesting to you, definitely give it a try. I think there's a lot to like about it, but I would say this is probably not going to stick very strongly in my personal memory. There you go. That was my thoughts on Nestlings. Let me know down in the comments below. Have you read this? What did you feel about it? Thank you so much for joining me. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, week, month, and year. I will see you back here next time. Thanks so much. Bye.